Hello, welcome back to the channel. I have a sloppy react for you today, and admittedly, it's a topic that I was kind of working on. I had the idea, and I can give you an exact answer to this question, by the way. I can save you the full 25 minutes, and yes, this is sped up because 25 minutes, we're not here to that long, especially because I like to yap as well. Wuthering Waves and ZZZ kind of have a lot in common. They have some things that are different, but the key difference to answer this question, the key difference, in my opinion, is what is proactive and what is reactive. Okay? And by that I mean, Wuthering Waves is very proactive. They want you to get in and hit the boss. For example, Tune Break. They want you to get in, do some rotation slop, to get in, break the boss so you can Tune Break, stagger them, and then go from there. ZZZ, however, is you can try and pull off this cool combo, but you need to pay attention to what the boss is doing, and it's why it gives you a lot of defensive options, like assists, parries, defensive swaps. I was going to say defensive agents, but nobody uses those. There's the nice little rupture gimmick where if you press E, it's a nice little counter. So, with that said, I'm excited to see what 25 minutes... How do you need 25 minutes to just say what is proactive and what is reactive? Outside of liking talking a lot, which, you know what, fair. That said, as an avid lover of both of these games, I'm excited to see whether this is just tribalism slop or a generally good video. So, with that said, let's get ready with this react, shall we?
Two frontrunners of action combat in gacha games. One, commonly referred to as rotation slot, another once hailed as a left mouse button simulator. But from the outside...
I wouldn't say left mouse button simulator. Unfortunately, he said that with Yi Shung Guang on the field. Which in that case, yeah, it is kind of true.
Looking in, they look much the same. Three characters, swap between them, flashy units, flashier ults, resource bars, and timer-based endgame. Then you play them, and they might feel similar at first, and then you learn them, and they start to feel nothing alike. So let's dive into why these games are similar, why they're so different, and where they land in the overall action RPG space. What their flaws are, and how to solve them. Also that we can...
One of the flaws is, admittedly, being a gacha game. It's as fun as the combat could be at a base level. You need new units to enhance that experience. So that is what I would say is kind of a big negative, or big flaw.
Answer what should be a very simple question. What's the difference between Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero?
One's proactive, and one's reactive. There you go, we've just answered and finished the video in 5 seconds. But no, let's carry on.
There's a way of describing action games, and really, games in general, which we're going to be using in this video, and that is player-sided versus enemy-sided. Player-sided encounters are the ones where the interesting decisions are about what you do. These exist in games based around the plans you create and your execution. The enemies in these games aren't the focus, they're the target dummies of varying shapes that you get to beat up
the big sponges.
in all sorts of spectacular ways. Some games like this which you might be familiar with are Doom, DMC5, and Katana Zero. These are games where the combat is about making you feel powerful.
That's cool.
Enemy-sided encounters, on the other hand, are ones where the decisions are forced on you by what the enemy does. Almost every meaningful decision you do is subject to the specific demands, gimmicks, or patterns of the enemy. By comparison, the player toolkit won't be too diverse or powerful. They'll have just enough to handle every enemy in the game, often focusing on a small range of defensive options to allow players to reliably interact with whatever nonsense it is that the difficult enemies are capable of. Games I'd say sit here are ones like the Dark Souls series, Undertale, and Everhood 2. And then there are ones which sit right in the middle. These games are exactly the kind that I personally like. If you've ever played a game where the hard fights feel like a fight between two equals, those exist right here.
I do agree with that. Calling Dark Souls enemy-sided. Have you ever tried a strength build before? You ever tried the Guts run before in Elden Ring? You do not give a fuck what the enemy does. You go in there, you go, it's time to bonk, and then you bonk. Okay? I don't think that was a good one there, personally.
They're characterized by the interactions between your toolkit and the enemy moveset, and the points where those can intersect and create interesting decisions. Here exist games like Kingdom Hearts 3, Armored Core 6, and Hollow Knight Silksong. After hearing all that, I'm sure you can start to piece...
Well, honestly, you could make an argument for all previously mentioned games based on which encounters you focus on. Mob fights lead, player side. Yeah, no, that's fair.
Together, if you've played both games, that ZZZ is notably more enemy-sided than Ruwa, and you'd be 100% correct about that. However, I'd say both of these games lean extremely player-sided, with Ruwa...
You keep saying that, and then showing Wei Shunguang. It's not enemy-sided then. She does not care what the enemy's doing. She's going to do her own thing. She just becomes Imouth, or the Imouth team, where I'm going to spam attack now.
Just even further along that line than ZZZ. And if you're still here, that means that you can
I think that's further reinforced the point, but he keeps showing Imouth and Yi Shunguang on these points, especially right then.
handle all of the nonsense that I've been saying so far and me making up terms for my own videos, which means that you'll probably like all the other stuff I have queued up. So click subscribe and make sure you don't miss out on any of that. So now that we know what kind of game each one is, the question is why even care? Well, the reason is because it lets us unpack why each...
Because it's fun. Because games are fun. That's why you should care. Games are fun. You play games to have fun. You don't play games to be like, oh, this game fucking sucks. I'm going to play 100 hours and just complain the whole time. No, because games are fun.
Each of these games have evolved in the way that they have. So hold on to that little piece of terminology while we talk about the most fundamental design difference between these two games. These games both have endgame modes, which have
one's proactive and one's
within
reactive.
a certain time limit. Or in other words, they both check how much damage you can do in a certain amount of time. So of course, the difference lies in what the games use to limit your damage output in that time frame. Ruler uses cooldowns to keep you from being able to hit your maximum output. Resonance Liberations, the ultimates of this game, tend to have a 25-second cooldown on top of their energy costs. Typically, these skills will be important or completely required for a character to be functional, so players will make sure to...
Saying that you can totally mitigate the energy cost at least by having a high energy regen. You know, anything above 130 energy regen, most likely, or even 125, most likely by the time the cooldown on the ultimate or liberation is over, you've got the energy required. Say Carlotta's liberation is 25-second cooldown, and you have 130 energy regen. By the time the cooldown is done, at 25 seconds, you will have enough energy to ult again. So you can mitigate one downside by just having high enough energy regen.
Have enough energy regen on their characters to meet the energy limit every 25 seconds. In addition to ultimates, Ruler's version of a resource bar, the Forte circuit, will grant access to another powerful and typically very crucial skill which the community will refer to as a character's Forte or Forte skill. These abilities tend to also have some manner of internal cooldown, usually between 20 and 25 seconds, to line up with the ultimate cooldown. Evidently, this is to keep the amount of powerful actions you can do within a 25-second window.
And that's why you do the whole rotation slop.
Consistent, no matter how good you are at the game. ZZZ on the other hand gates you on resources. There isn't as standard of a formula here as Ruler has with their cooldowns. Resources will be accrued in differing ways per character. Some gain it from using their specials, some from dodging, many from attacking in some form. But really, almost...
For example, this right here. I was going to use Yi Xuan as an example. The bar. If you basically use up Auric Ink, for example, hold E, or hold left click to do heavy attack, that slowly fills up. Okay, no, that's fair.
Some gain it from using their specials, some from dodging, many from attacking.
However, Wuthering Waves kind of has the same thing. For example, look at Imouth. You saw all the animations when she cuts in and she does resonance skills. I almost said liberation now. She does the resonance skill. And the enhanced Eve, that's when you get the little cutscene simulator. That is a case of, okay, that's a special resource bar that's being filled up. So, they're not that different, they have the same things.
Attacking in some form, but really almost all of them will be gained from what the character wanted to be doing anyway. These resources just give you a line of optimization you can take during combat to optimize your damage. When you compare these two philosophies, there's at least one clear difference you can intuit in how you expect to deal damage, even without playing either game. Enemy interference inherently matters more in the cooldown game when the cooldowns are tight, and matters much less when the cooldowns are lenient. Often in Ruler, the rotations are pretty tight. Doing all of your obligatory unfield tasks with a team will often bring you close enough to the 25-second mark that enemy disruption can feel pretty bad, since every second wasted is damage that you can't get back. If the timer runs over while you're halfway through your rotation, unfortunate, but that's a big damage loss. In ZZZ by comparison, not only can you adjust how you spend resources to always make sure that you have spent what you've built, the game also tends to directly reward you for interacting with disruptive mechanics, whether that be bonus points in Deadly Assault, gimmick phases...
Yeah, I was going to say the performance assaults, the corrupted barrier forcing you to do stuff. I was going to say Masma Shield kind of forcing you to interact with the mechanics itself. Once again, you're being reactive. You're reacting to what the boss is doing, what the enemy is doing. You're reacting to it.
And energy, or mechanics that rapidly build the enemy's stun gauge. That asymmetry is why Ruler is often known as rotation slot. So, let's talk about that game for a little. A cooldown-based economy under a strict timer means that the end goal of Wooer is cramming the maximum damage you can into a desired window. That's a puzzle you often solve before the encounter. Ensuring you can create a rotation that deals enough damage, practicing it to the point where you can perform it consistently, and then executing it cleanly in the fight. In the primary endgame modes, there aren't really that many choices to make, and the reason that's true is because Wooer's kits and teams can be quite particular. Every character has a concerto bar, which you can think of as a side quest you can complete during their time on.
I've said this before about June Break, and I'll say it again. I don't like June Break. Okay? I don't like it. And a part of that is for what Jen is referring to here with, if we just go back real quick.
Enough damage, practicing it to the point where you can perform it consistently, and then executing it cleanly in the fight. In the primary endgame modes, there aren't really that many choices to make, and the reason that's true is because Wooer's kits and teams can be quite particular.
They've designed people like for example, I'm pretty sure this is the Fusion Burst team. Yeah, Danae is trying to do the Fusion Burst. But you can probably see a clear difference between doing Fusion Burst, and it's talking about wanting to maximize the damage and, you know, the output so you get the cooldowns all off. But Tune Break doesn't really require any of those cooldowns to be active. Okay? Oh, Betty, it doesn't really care about cooldowns because it's going to fill up passively. Well, I say passively. It's going to fill up regardless of the basic attacks. It's going to be really small, but it's going to fill up regardless. And then you do the big Tune Break, you disrupt the enemy amazingly, and then you go into the big damage section. So I don't want this to devolve into a Tune Break rant. I've already been there. No, for the most part, I agree.
Every character has a concerto bar, which you can think of as a side quest you complete during their time on field, and finishing it lets you swap out with a payoff called an outro skill. That much is fine. The problem is that a lot of characters add extra conditions on top of that. For example, buffs that disappear if you swap a character off field, or resources that are locked behind rotating in a specific way. Stack enough of those together and
So this is why they design characters to work with partners. For example, thankfully, Augusta Ayuno. Like, they work perfectly together because by the time you've got Augusta's cooldowns, or all her cooldowns active, you've filled this up to do the big resonance ult, Ayuno is ready to then come in and be like, hey, my cooldowns are over now. Get me in there, coach. Tag me in. And also, that's why you have characters like Mornay who require very, very minimal on-field time because their buffs last for so long. Once again, this is just really saying we're going to be really proactive with what we do. And we're going to maximize the potential. You're being proactive in how you get the cooldowns, how you manage the cooldowns and the characters coming in, how you handle the rotations. Yeah, it's just all about being proactive.
Being the only constraint you're playing around. Almost every character is imposing micro goals on their own rotation, and sometimes on other characters too. Which is why a Wooer fight that starts going wrong is so annoying to pull back. Watch pretty much any level of play, and the moment someone gets meaningfully disrupted, they'll just restart. Accidentally outro to the wrong character, lose a buff for taking too long, or swapping when you shouldn't have. For most players, it's just not worth salvaging. And to be clear, you can recover a rotation gone wrong in Wooer. It's just, why would you?
Yeah, it's called Play Imuff. She's so easy to just recover, be like, oh, whoopsie. Anyway.
The restart button is right there. You spend all that time learning the rotation, and you know it works. Why sit there improvising around the character's kit in order to barely clear, when the rotation you picked up from a guide does the job every single time? Hence, rotations of the slop variety. Now that's enough wuthering our waves for now. Let's do a little talk on ZZZ's kit design. ZZZ, having come a long way from being considered a button mashing game, for me, this game is more of a resource management simulator.
Also, I hate that comparison. If you think about it, every game is a button mash game. Because you're constantly mashing the button to attack in any game regardless. So I think that's a very unfair thing to say. Not talking about Jen, by the way. I'm talking about just everybody being like, oh, it's just a mash left click simulator. It's like, yeah, that's every single game on PC. It's how you attack. If I'm not mashing the attack button, then I'm not attacking.
A resource-based economy means that the bulk of the skill in piloting a given team comes from understanding how to efficiently build and spend resources in order to maximize damage. To talk about this effectively, we need to split the teams we'll be piloting into two different team types in ZZZ, anomaly teams and attack teams. Let's start with attack teams since they're easier to explain. These teams typically have a couple of properties in common. They often aim to stun the enemy and deal a huge burst of damage within that stun window. Stunning an enemy in ZZZ applies a large multiplier to all damage that they receive, so aiming to line up your resources within the stun window is the most efficient use of your resources when you can afford to do so. Runs will often aim for a number of stuns to allow the resources you build to be spent a certain amount of times. Second,
I get what he's saying, but Anomaly also has a stunner now with Nangong. So does that also apply to the Miyabi teams? You know, Miyabi, Nangong, Yuzuha? The same would also apply, and you label them with Anomaly teams when, sure, Yuzuha is Anomaly focused, but it's just her. Nangong can trigger a bloom, like amazing a bloom damage when the enemy's stunned because she's one of the best stunners. And Miyabi is a crit scaling Anomaly, so very weird. Also, it's just Miyabi. But other Anomaly agents, I can totally agree with, like Valina bonus. Like, that duo is basically, we're going to stack up the Anomaly damage. And boom, there it is. There's the big explosion moment.
these teams usually devote a vast majority of their field time to one character, either a DPS with an off-field stunner.
No. No, I don't think they do. Maybe outside of Soldier Zero. I don't think so. Say for somebody with the Soldier Zero team, you know, Soldier Zero, Trigger, whatever else you want. Like, because you want to swap into Trigger, and then Trigger comes in, you press E once, you swap out, Aftershock is there, ready to go, then Soldier Zero comes in, does big damage, you know, you're swapping, you're reacting to what the boss is doing by dodging, and then following up to inflict more of the Silver Mark debuff, and then goes there. She spends a lot of time on field. Everyone else is just, you are constantly swapping out. And you're being forced, you're being forced to swap out as well, because the enemy goes, hey, Golden Flash, parry this, and then you do. So I wouldn't say they dedicate a lot of time to on the field. For example, you're looking at this team. You still want Lucy to come in quite frequently and press E, to then swap into Yishuan again, and then go into Pan, then swap back to Yishuan. You're constantly swapping back and forth.
Usually devote a vast majority of their field time to one character, either a DPS with an off-field stunner so that your attacker may build the resources and then spend them during the stun, or an on-field stunner with a burst attacker who comes on-field during the stun window to deal damage. The latter is less common,
Hugo.
but both will have a support who is mostly a cheerleader who provides buffing to the rest of the team. And that's it really. Attack teams vary a lot in how they end up playing. Even what I just told you doesn't really apply to every single one.
And then you got Shugwonk, who's just, I'm going to ignore what the game wants to do. I'm going to ignore what the game is and just go fucking nuts. Case in point.
But in general, these are the most standard teams. An example is Yishen, Jufufu, and Lucia. Yishen will be greedy with her field time in order to build up as much resources as she can. She benefits from a more selfless stunner, so Jufufu will take the role of an off-field.
You say that, but you have to manage what the other two are doing. You have to manage the stun window. You have to manage Lucia's uptime on the bar. Like, what is the obsession with having saying, oh, Yishuan has to spend a lot of time on field? It's true, but it's not like it's all the time.
Stunner, while Lucia provides the buffs. The other half of the roster is anomaly teams. I won't run through the entire system here, but it functions as a completely different
because there's a lot to go
available
through.
to a certain class of character. Instead of stunning and bursting, you're stacking an elemental effect on the enemy until it triggers, and sometimes chaining those triggers for damage. So the moment-to-moment goals vary from an attack team, but it's built on the same type of logic where you'll build a team to allow for all of your characters to gain the resources that they need to accomplish the goals of their kit. So now I've spoken about the player side of things, so let's talk about the enemy side. To do so, let's talk about Dark Souls. Or more generally, let's talk about the wonders of looking at your screen.
Let's talk about Dark Souls. Loads up Elden Ring footage. Okay, buddy.
I mentioned player side and enemy side games before, and now we can try to see what that framing is supposed to help us understand. So to start, I'm going to ask a silly question here. What is the point of there being different enemy types in games? Why even bother spending dev time on it? Well, when we look at any action game, the answer is clear as day. They provide different challenges for us to go up against. It would get boring if we just fought the same ones. We need different movesets to go up against. Stuff with different strengths and weaknesses to encourage us to use different underexplored parts of our toolkit and get us to think in different ways. Even in games with more limited player options such as Dark Souls and more generally Souls-like games, the enemies being different provides a unique challenge with each encounter, requiring you to learn different tells, timings, and punish windows in order to progress. Okay, cool, great answer. So if that is the case, why design a player-sided game in...
Maybe I don't understand, but what was the point of just being... It feels like you just want to talk about Dark Souls. Just talk about Dark Souls. Because that was just... Oh yeah, the boss... All you said there was just the boss that does stuff. Great.
The first place? Well, to answer that, we're going to need to expand upon an inevitable friction that both of these games have come to face, and the differences in how they've tried to handle it. Here is the tension every single one of these games runs into. A player-sided game makes you feel powerful, and feeling powerful is exactly what a gacha wants to sell you. You pulled the character, you invested in the character...
The way to make you feel powerful... Lucy is an example, yeah. Yeah, no. No, it's not, it's just a funny character. They want to sell you fun first and foremost, it just helps if they're strong as well.
It should feel good. A fully enemy-sided game sells the opposite thing. It sells you an uphill battle against something bigger than you. It makes your skill and your
Also, once again, you just showed Elden Ring, talking about they want to sell you the difficulty, make you feel powerless. You played Elden Ring? You know the level up system that makes you powerful? Yeah?
understanding matter most, and a gacha fundamentally needs your account to matter. So there's a hard ceiling on how enemy-sided one of these games can ever actually go, no matter how many different enemy types they sit down and try to design. But somewhere...
No, that is true, though. There comes a point where it's like, okay, no matter how difficult the boss might be, no matter how tricky it is on the mechanic-wise, there's always going to be a way to beat it, because they want to sell you the way to beat it. And you can still beat it regardless, because that's half the challenge, that's half the fun. Just in any game, but ZZ's here, so we'll use that as an example. She won. Yi Sheng Wang is the clear answer to his difficulty, like to dealing with him. However, she's not mandatory. You can still do it without that. It's just humans as a species will pick the path of less resistance. And the path of less resistance is, honestly, yeah, spend money to get the answer. Once again, the whole selling you a solution. Or they create a problem to sell you the solution.
Along the line, clearly the ZZZ devs heard that the game was too easy, and they clearly, genuinely love action clearly go, no matter how many different enemy types they sit down and try to design. But somewhere along the line, clearly the ZZZ devs heard that the game was too easy, and they clearly, genuinely...
Someone explain this. I feel like you have explained that. That's to be the Miasma Shield, which is just, like I said before, it's a way to go, okay, it's too easy, we're going to add Miasma Shield, and it's going to prey on gacha gamers not reading, which, guess what happened when Miasma Shield came out? Exactly what they thought would banked on happened. Gacha gamers didn't read, and everybody complained about Miasma Shield. And it turns out, you have to react to what the boss is doing to limit it. Once again, it's just boiling down to the classic proactive versus reactive. With ZZZ being the reactive of the two.
Love action games. So they started pushing ZZZ in a more enemy-sided direction. More gimmick phases, more aggressive enemy types, more modes that ask you to do more than just damage. And in doing that, they ran into a problem.
Also, I feel like it's being very disingenuous calling games player-sided and enemy-sided. Because it feels like it's trying to say, oh yeah, this is just completely player-sided, and it's not. Every single game is both player-sided and enemy-sided. It just depends on which one leads into more. Does that make sense? Like, I'm agreeing with the points, but I'm not liking how it's being put across. Because it feels like it's saying... No, we'll just carry on.
Because a large part of the way that they'd been reducing the friction of the game, which is important for gachas, the way they'd been allowing every single player to access their character's strength was by making them streamlined and easy to play, and also handing out an enormous amount of invincibility across the cast, without even mentioning egregious characters that...
I don't agree with the invincibility. Across the cast. It's mostly just the Yi Sheng Wang. Or should I say Void Hunter thing where it feels invincible. Because, like, Yi Sheng is the biggest, like, offender of this. Being like, the enemy's going to hit you, and it's like, I do not care, I'm in my awakened state. Left button mash. Like, she just doesn't care. I like Miyabi. You can still interrupt Miyabi, but if you have all 6 stacks of Ghost Flame, and then you hold the charge attack, you're invincible there, which is totally fine. Because it's just that one move.
Like Yi Sheng, a lot of characters have minimal reason to be getting hit during combat. And here's the issue with that. Enemy-sided design lives and dies by how you get to interact with the enemy kit. And you can't interact with an enemy kit while you're invincible. So they couldn't just generically make enemies more scary because half the cast just doesn't care. They needed a way to make the game more enemy-sided, but they also needed controlled interaction. And that is where I think basically every recent ZZZ mechanic comes from. Hence the side objectives of Deadly Assault, hence Miasma, control skills, and the list goes on.
I don't agree with this half the cast being invincible talk. I don't agree with it. I don't think they are. It's just, oh yeah, I pressed E, so I'm invincible. Yeah, I would hope so. I'm trying to get a special skill, but also, no, because you could be attacked out of it. It depends on how long it's invincible for. If you miss, it's all about if you miss time that. If you press it too early, you're going to get smacked in the face. And then, like we talked about, Miasma Shield, the control phases, which I really enjoy. This feels like a complaint, but a really weird one that you're making.
And you'll notice that the center of a lot of these mechanics is defensive assist. And it's worth thinking about why that specifically is the answer that they're relying on. The easy answer is that it's the easy answer. The devs know exactly what they're handing you. Almost, emphasis on almost, everyone interacts with it in almost the same standard.
Yeah, evasive assist, suck.
It makes the game more enemy-sided without ever opening up the game to being unpredictable. And, in fairness, it does look very cool. The issue, if you consider it one, is that the game turns into play your team and also press defensive assist. And that's not super hard or interesting if you ask me. It's a reaction check, sure, but it's not a particularly hard one. Sometimes, even, it runs the risk.
Well, that's very subjective. Because some people might struggle with that. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I don't find it a challenge, so therefore it's bad. No, people struggle with different things. Okay, it's there as a universal option for everybody. If you want to talk about anything, talk about how Rupture Agents all have a built-in parry with their E skills. I'm talking, well, I say E, but most, like, Banyu's a different one because you have to right-click, you have to press for dodge, you become stone. But Yishwan, you press E, parry. Yidhari, you hold E, the enemy hits, you let go, parry. And then you can follow it with an attack. Billy, hold E, it's a parry. He gets hit, he parries, and then he does a follow-up attack. To talk about that rather than just being like, yeah, every agent can use a defense assist, so therefore it's bad. Like, we could do it. So it's like, whatever.
Risk of feeling too intrusive. To give you an example, Osu is a great game, and it's a lot of fun. But would I want to play segments of an Osu map interspersed with an action game? Not really. That's kind of how I feel about control skills in certain phases of recent bosses. It's neat and fun, but it almost feels too divorced from actually piloting my characters because it's just so standardized in how you interact with it. And underneath everything mentioned is the fact that ZZZ is a gacha. Mechanics with real emergence.
I think the real complaint here that you want to make is probably the fact that control phases is just an extension of defensive assists. Like, what about, instead of pressing the spacebar to use a defensive assist, what if you had to dodge? So you have to press the dodge button. But, like, I think that would be cool, being like, oh, you can't parry this, you have to dodge. That would be way better than just going, yeah, it's just a defense assist disguised as something else, but it's still defense assist. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode where it's like, alright, gang, let's see what's underneath this new phase. Defensive assists.
Depth, the kind where players start finding powerful things that the devs never planned for, are not actually what a gacha wants. They want the game to feel more enemy-sided. What they don't want is to grow the web of interactions between your account and an encounter, because that web is unpredictable. And unpredictable player power is how you end up with something like Mono Ice, and how your perfectly tailored best-in-slot team ends up not being that. So they're boxed in.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that for one reason. It's like, hey, the devs didn't account for the players doing this thing that is clearly stated in the character's kits that could totally happen. If the devs didn't account for this to be playable and happen, why is it playable and happening then? And if it was... Yeah. What?
by their own design. They want the game to be enemy-sided, but the business model says otherwise. So a lot of that actually carries over to Wuwa. This is also a game that wants you to feel strong in cinematic, that wants these characters' personalities to shine in combat. But Wuwa started from a different place, or at least it felt like it did. Wuwa wears its Souls-like inspiration pretty openly, and despite the fact that these days Wuwa characters are out here doing, well...
Wuwa with its Souls-like... What? What? You did not just call Wuthering Waves a Souls-like. What?
whatever this is. Early on, they genuinely felt a lot weaker relative to the enemies than anything in ZZZ did. You could very much see it in the sheer number of people getting dismantled at launch, and you can still see some of that inspiration in the hologram mode. So what was the problem?
Okay, holograms are the best endgame mode, or the best mode in Wuthering Waves, hands down. Because, and here's why they're the best. That's reactive in a proactive game. Okay? So normally, the goal of Wuthering Waves is basically, I'm going to get in there and do as much damage as I can with my rotation, without really care what the boss does. And if the boss stuns me, or knocks me out of my carefully crafted rotation, I press restart. Holograms are basically, I'm going to go in there with my rotation, I'm going to go in there and try and do as much damage as I can within the timer, but you actually have to pay attention to the boss because it will one-shot your characters. So you have to react to what the boss is doing, therefore your game plan, your rotation, is thrown out the window.
Same as before, it comes back to one word, rotation slop. Over time, the meta developed, and dedicated players worked out two things at once. They worked out the best rotations, and they also worked out it's simply better to commit to your rotation and tank hits rather than try to avoid them. They also figured out that the parry system was mostly cosmetic. Yes, it damages the stagger gauge, but you already don't care to look at what the boss is doing.
But it looks cool as fuck. So, Aura playing the game, like, Aura wins.
So it doesn't really matter. Outside of holograms where bosses hit too hard to tank, the game turned completely player-sided. Actually engaging with an enemy moveset just wasn't worth it, not when you've got 25 seconds to fit everything into. So what did Kuro do about this? Much the same thing Hoyo did. They started shifting power into the enemies. You get bosses like Sentry Construct, which is a genuinely great boss, where landing a parry while it's airborne drags it back to the ground. So all of a sudden there's a boss with a parry window that is core to the...
Yeah, but you also don't care because you can just left button mouse click spam. It's knock it out of the air anyway, just deal enough damage. You can just ignore what the boss is doing and be like, yeah, anyway.
Fight. It also has some attacks very worth dodging, and has a mechanic where it throws up a shield and recovers its own stagger gauge. I said the stagger gauge doesn't matter, but the moment a boss genuinely has annoying attacks and a way to deny your damage while it's free to move, it suddenly becomes very worth your time to stagger it. And since 2.0, they've kept up the pace on this. Hecate and her infamous parry sequence, the False Sovereign's absurd damage output, and Reactor Husk with its breakable part.
Once again, you can just completely ignore Hecate's parry by going, I'm gonna just deal enough damage with Imuth. Or anybody, like you can freeze them, Carlotta, you can press E to freeze for like 1.5 seconds and then follow up there. You can just basically ignore a lot of it. And that's like one of my big frustrations with Wuthering Waves is just, I don't care what the enemy is doing, because what I'm doing is just going to ignore anything.
And projectiles that you can reflect right back at it. So did this work? Not exactly. These bosses do have their own unique properties, but those properties aren't...
You've also got the Tune Break bar just being like, oh no, the boss is doing anything. Alright, F, stop doing what you're doing right now.
...prevalent enough to make you change your strategy on the way in, and they aren't intrusive enough to make you
Look at most bosses are locked behind their hologram version. Yeah, once again, holograms are just the best versions of... are just the best in the game.
...genuinely think on the fly. And if something does go wrong, well, it's easier to just restart. So is the fix to make bosses even more intrusive? Also, not exactly, and this is kind of the trap. Wuwa is still a game where a cleanly executed rotation vastly outdamages one where something went wrong. So it's genuinely mechanically correct to focus almost entirely on completing your rotation, making slight timing adjustments and dodging only where strictly needed, which creates this kind of paradox. More interaction actually makes Wuwa players feel like they aren't playing the game, even though the rotation-only version that they want to play is massively stripped down from what the combat could end up being. Making bosses intrusive enough to constantly disrupt one's rotation would be a hard pill for players to swallow. It's already a hard pill, and Wuwa bosses are nowhere near as interactive as ZZZ.
That's just a player skill issue. That's a player skill issue. But like, oh, this boss is designed. It's like, yeah, just, I don't know, learn. Play the game.
So how do you get more interactive
fights? Interactive and disruptive aren't exactly the same thing, but generally both cost time, and costing time feels bad in all the reasons mentioned. Yeah. No, I agree.
Across the whole game without making people feel like the game is being taken away from them. And honestly, I think this one's much easier to solve than it looks, partly because they've already solved it in parts. If they just took the good parts of bosses they've already made, put them into one fight and refined them, we'd have a great roster of bosses on our hands that rewards decision-making mid-fight, without necessarily hard-stopping the structured gameplay that Wuwa is known for. But also, let's step back and talk a little bit about the root cause of the issues in both games. When you actually stare at all of this, all of the unique enemy-sided interactions both games keep on creating...
Hang on. What was this?
Without making people feel like the game is being taken away from them. And honestly, I think this one's much easier to solve than it looks, partly because they've already solved it in parts. If they just took the good parts of bosses they've already made...
This statement here, if they just made the boss good, yeah, people wouldn't complain if they just made the boss good. But you also can't... Part of the challenge and frustration, the difficult... Because what this is basically saying, or asking, or hinting at, is if they just took the good parts of bosses they've already made...
Put them into one fight and...
refined them. You're basically saying, if we took all the urgency and agency of what the boss is doing, and just say they're a damage sponge... Do you see the problem there? You basically say, what if we take away all the difficulty of the boss fight and just let the players easily clear? That's boring as fuck. That's boring. It really is. It's boring. It's not fun. If that actually happened, if they actually did something like that, I would not be as big a fan of Wuthering Waves as I am. Or ZZ or any game like that. Just being like, yeah, we made the boss really easy. You're welcome. It's like, okay. Cool. What are we doing here? I just don't agree with that.
We'd have a great roster of bosses on our hands that reward...
Because you wouldn't have a great roster of bosses in your hand. You'd have a great roster of sponges. Of trading dummies. That's what they'd be. Because you just wouldn't care. Like, there's a reason... You can't say, oh, Wuthering Waves just rotation slop. And then complain when they get rid of the rotation slop aspect. Be like, hey, you can't just mash buttons against this boss. You have to pay attention and, kind of dodge sometimes. But I don't want to dodge. I just want to spam rotation slop. And it's like... It's such... You can't complain, and then... Oh, you can't... Is it what I'm saying making sense? You can't just be like, hey, get rid of this thing that makes the boss really bad so I can just have an easier time. No. Because it wouldn't be fun. It just wouldn't be a good boss fight. It would just be a trading dummy. You just go in... They basically turn... They turn the bosses into mob fights. It's just like, yeah, I didn't care what the boss did because I was just kept spamming left click to attack. Which you can already kind of do with the IMF Tunebreak team. So, we're already kind of there. So say with Yi Sheng Guang being like, yeah, what if we just turned every character into Yi Sheng Guang? Because the enemy was just kind of like, oh, you never have to do a defensive assist ever. You just go in there and do raw damage.
What's decision-making mid-fight, without necessarily hard-stopping the structured gameplay that...
Because what do you reward decision-making mid-fight? Without necessarily hard-stopping the structured gameplay. But it wouldn't be rewarding, would it? It wouldn't be a reward. It would just be, yeah, we handed you the way to victory. You wouldn't be playing the game. You would just be left mouse button simulator.
Wuwa is known for. But also, let's step back and talk a little bit about the root cause of the issues in both games.
I feel like I've already just said why the solution feels off. Because you take away all the urgency. Even then, it'd be like, oh yeah, Wuthering Waves is very... It'd be like Elden Ring. It'd be like, okay, I'm fighting Promised Consort Radahn. Okay? But they've nerfed him. Oh, okay, what's the nerf? Yeah, he just kind of stands there now. Doesn't really do anything. He just kind of stays in one place. It's like, well, great, it's not really a boss fight then, is it? You've taken away all the urgency of the fight. And what makes it difficult in the first place. Hopefully that makes sense to the point I'm trying to make.
When you actually stare at all of this, all of the unique enemy-sided interactions both games keep on creating, it's kind of a strange solution when you really think about it, right? Go back to the games I brought up earlier. Elden Ring, Kingdom Hearts, Silksong, Hades, every single one of them feels incredible, moment to moment.
Hades, fucking fantastic game, by the way. If you haven't played it, I would strongly urge you to try it, and Hades too.
Without reinventing the wheel for every single boss. And the difference here is simple. Ruwa and ZZZ both have devalued dodging and parrying, each in their own way. Just dodging and parrying on their own would be enough if you actually had to do them. There's a reason why dodge is in basically every action game.
What? Hold on.
Would be enough if you actually had to do them.
If you actually had to... You do actually have to do them in ZZZ. That's what Masma Shield is. Sure, you could just attack them and use ults to break it down, but it's also really fast if you do defensive assists and parries. Wuthering Waves, okay, granted, you can still dodge there because some attacks will really fuck you up. Like Lampy Lumen, he can freeze you, but you have to dodge that. But I know you got the example here of, okay, here's a tube break, ready roll. What? Devalue dodging and parrying. I wouldn't say devalued it. I would rather say, or I would say, they've just made it less incentivized to do so.
Just dodging and parrying on their own would be enough if you actually had to do them. There's a reason why dodge is in basically every action game ever made. It's the simplest possible tool for making you care about what this specific enemy is doing right now. So the most obvious fix is just to make dodging rewarding again. But I would do something slightly different because dodging in these games is frankly, unfortunately, piss easy.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of want it to be easy. There's no point dodging. It's like fat rolling in Dark Souls. You can still do it with, like, say you're over encumbered or you have more weight than you probably should, that you can carry. So you slow roll. You can still do it. You still have the iframes. However, you have to really have strict timing on it. But that's a lot more difficult. That's where the dodging becomes a lot more or less piss easy, as you said there.
Hyuki, a recent Ruwa character, has a mechanic where a well-timed heavy attack parries the enemy and shortcuts her straight to the highest damage part of her attack sequence. Yishen over in ZZZ...
That's the thing as well with
piss easy.
With Hyuki.
Hyuki, a recent Ruwa character, has a mechanic where a well-timed heavy attack...
Well-timed heavy attack. Okay, you can't say, oh, they devalue dodging and parrying, and then be like, anyway, you've got a well-timed heavy attack. It's like, no, that's not devalued then. That's put more emphasis on it. That's giving you more options to parry. It's just that they've locked it behind, or they tied it to a character you have to spend limited time and resources to get.
Parries the enemy and shortcuts her straight to the highest damage part of her attack sequence. Yishen over in ZZZ has a parry on her EX special that refunds her resources.
Okay, but like I've said before, all the Rupture Agents do. I'm not too sure about Minato, but Banyu, Yidhari, Billy, or Silly if you prefer, S-Billy, they all have the same parry reward resources.
Just give some version of that to every character.
You do not want that on every character. You do not want that in every character in ZZZ. You do not want that. Because then it Hang on. I'm gonna attempt to let me cook.
Button on every single unit that rewards you in their own character's specific way for reacting well or for actually knowing the enemy's moveset.
Okay.
Yishen's version happens to be more rewarding and easier to use than Hyuki's, so maybe...
You've also failed to mention that you can follow up Yishuan's parry with 3 extra attacks. After that, if you do it right, you get follow up there. Same with Hyuki, where it's, okay, I've done the well-timed parry. It scaled me to the highest part of my damage potential. There you go. But no, you do not want... You don't want it in every single character, because then you're already taking the amazing characters and making them even better. It would just be a tune break situation where, okay, every character can do this, but some characters can do it better. So you're just going to feel very upset by it. Which is why I'm so adamant against this. Because I'm like, okay, let's say, for example, Vivian. Hey, Vivian could do a parry because I pressed E at the right time. That's awesome. It's like, yeah, but Yishuan gets way more value from doing it, so it feels really bad. So why would you? It's the exact same thing that's happened there, or it would happen here. Just like with tune break being like, Lune, Hyuki have built-in tune breaks, and there's a reason that when they tune break, it's better than when someone like Sigrika tune breaks. Because she is a Laharoyan character who came out, and her tune break is basically the bog standard one for non-3.x units of, yeah, you just deal big damage. So yeah, you do not want a specialized parry on every character in ZZZ. Same way you don't want a specialized parry on every character in Wuthering Waves, because it'd be really bad. by all means, have characters have special interactions and parries, but don't give it to everybody. Because then you're just going to feel really bad. It's the same way of like, okay, I'm going to have every single boss just have no urgency to take all the good parts and remove all the bad parts that players don't like. Because you also have to think about as well, who are you listening to? It's like, okay, this thing of this boss is, for example, Lampy. Let's use Lampy as an example for Wuthering Waves. Lampy is a really badly designed boss. I wish this thing would change. And it's like, okay, what is that thing you want to change? Oh, the part where they freeze you, you have to wiggle. It's like, yeah, just dodge. It's like, no, but I don't want to do that, so it's really bad. And it's like, okay, we're going to listen to you, and we're going to remove that part of the boss's kit that freezes you. We have to pay attention to. It's basically saying like, hey, by the way, this isn't just a completely one-sided, player-sided experience. You need to still pay attention whilst you're doing your rotation. Okay, you need to plan around that. This is what you want. You don't want the game to just be easy, because you're going to feel really bad. Okay? You're going to feel really bad.
Even it out a little, but the core of it is just that. And I think that one small thing would make every single encounter in both games feel like a unique encounter, and hand some identity back to all of these bosses that very much deserve it. Now that sounds like a whole lot of negatives, so you might be wondering why I even play these games, but I do very much enjoy the combat of both games, so let's start with Wuwa.
Yeah, me
Wuwa
too.
has a pretty unique aspect with swapping. That being, when you swap out of a character in Wuwa during an attack, they'll complete the animation and then disappear. But if you swap back into the character while they're still on field, you'll be able to seamlessly pick back up with controlling them, along with keeping access to any combo options that the character would have had access to. This vastly increases the mechanical skill ceiling of the game, and sometimes means you're piloting multiple characters at once. Another thing I like about Wuwa is the concerto mechanic.
Going with Looper, though, that's kind of playing into the whole... Because you can tie it back to the rotation slop argument. Well, Looper's whole thing is she wants you to swap out to other resonators. Okay, she wants you to swap out, build up the... not the forte, but the concerto energy so you can do intros and outros. That way, by the time you've done it and you've filled back, you've gone through the whole rotation for Looper, you cut in, she does an enhanced intro, and then you rinse and repeat that section. So she actively encourages you to swap out to other characters, and that's, I think, the direction they should go, to make characters feel less, like better terms, restrictive on field.
I talked about it earlier, but it's pretty much a side quest you have to complete for every character. This means almost every character's field time is guaranteed to be non-negligible. Even if you don't get to see the full extent of cool animations and work that the devs put into every character, you'll get to see most of the cool, important stuff that they want you to see. ZZZ, on the other hand, has a core mechanic I really enjoy: stun. Stun is great because it almost feels like an alternate goal to aim towards during combat, and that means encounters will oscillate between more...
Stun is just tune break, let's be honest, stun is just tune break. Oh, tune break is just stun. So, they have the same thing, okay? Just gonna put out there.
Freeform in more structured phases. Optimizing stun rotations and learning tricks to fit in as much damage as possible is also pretty fun.
You ever hit an enemy with a free ult yeesh one during stun? Feels pretty fucking good. I highly recommend it.
Another great thing about ZZZ is how diverse the teams are in playstyle. A lot of teams have very unique things that they need to go for in combat, whether that be stunning as often as possible, inflicting as many anomalies as possible, sometimes on-field your DPS, sometimes on-field your stunner, anomaly teams that want to stun, and even teams that freeze lock the enemies. Overall, ZZZ has a wide variety.
Even teams that freeze like the enemies, that's just usual. That's just Miyabi. And also, they've kind of veered away from making bosses freezable because of Miyabi. Best character in the game, by the way.
Variety of team strategies, to where you can really enjoy the feel of some teams and dislike the feel of others. Oh yeah, and I really like Holograms in Wuwa and Annihilation Simulacrum in ZZZ.
Yeah, that's kind of best.
They're great challenge modes with fun fights. I even have a video on the latter if you want to see why I like it so much. So to end, some recommendations. Whether you've played neither game and made it to the end of this video, which if that is you, thanks I guess, and you should probably click subscribe, but even if you've only played one of these games, then hopefully I can sell you on the other. Let's start with specific characters. Wuwa characters, on average, tend to be much more fleshed out than you on the other. Let's start with specific characters. Wuwa characters, on average...
Anti-Banyu main defensive shield. Okay. Banyu is really fun though, I recommend him.
Which tend to be much more fleshed out than in ZZZ. With various combos, airing ground, and parts of their kits you'll basically never see if you aren't somewhat dedicated to the character. If you're the kind of person who wants to sit down and really enjoy a handful of specific
Talk about
characters,
Zanny there, by the way.
having a main, so to speak, I would direct you to Wuwa. Teams, on the other hand, at a high enough level of play, do kind of turn into rotation slop in both games. Not too many real choices actually.
Yeah, no, that's fair saying, like, every game kind of turns into rotation slop, because it's why I don't really like the term rotation slop, because a lot of these games have you swap out. A lot of games will have multiple characters want you to swap out. Think Xenoblade, of the Xenoblade series with chain attacks. Is that not just rotation slop? I'm thinking of Xenoblade 3, for example. Their chain attack is just, I press chain attack, I want to fill up the bar so my character does a big move, but I'm chaining all these smaller attacks beforehand to fill that bar up. Rotation slop, because you're rotating the characters you want to use. That's why I don't like the term rotation slop.
Exist in gameplay once you have your strategy laid out. If you consider a choice to be a situation where different players can come to a different decision, then neither game has too much of that once you've actually learnt the intricacies of a team. You can watch my last video if you want more on that. But at a lower level of play, rotations in WoW are a lot more important to learn in order to clear content. Rotations in ZZZ feel much more like a tool for optimizing inconsistency out of your runs. So if you're someone who's going to play casually, then go with ZZZ for a less structured, more free experience, and WoW for more structured combat. And
Counterpoint, play whatever you want. Okay, games are fun. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Great. Because I'm going to be honest, say like if you want a more easier time, play ZZZ. You say that, but give a new player an enemy with corruptive barrier. Can have a really shit time, especially because like for 2 seconds it flashes up being like, if I say get rid of it, it's like, there you go, and there it goes. So yeah, no, I don't agree. I think just play what you like, play what you want, play what looks good, and then if you don't like it, hey, you can stop. There you go. So the benefit of gacha games, they're free.
If you're a tryhard, both games are going to end up being rotation-based anyway, so you have two paths available to you. WoW has the higher mechanical ceiling if you're looking for that. Meanwhile, ZZZ is currently the more enemy-side.
Also, saying it has a higher mechanical ceiling, you've played anomaly teams, right? You played anomaly teams? Pretty high mechanics, right there. Just gonna put out there. I don't think it's fair saying that. I don't think it's fair comparing to. A lot of games have different mechanics. So what's high mechanical ceiling for Wuthering Waves is not going to be the same as with ZZZ, but it's still going to have, ZZ still going to have its own high mechanical ceilings. Unless the point here is being like, yeah, Wuthering Waves has it a bit more, which, to be honest, I don't really agree with.
Game. So if you're more interested in a game where you have to respond to enemy patterns and you want each fight to feel different, then ZZZ would be where I direct you.
Yeah, so, once again, it's just going like, do you like proactive games or reactive games? That's what that's what the entire video was. I answered this video within the first 45 seconds. That is the difference of the two. Wuthering Waves is proactive, ZZZ is reactive. There you go.
Also important to note, ZZZ rotations will vary depending on what boss you're fighting. Meanwhile, no such thing really exists for WoW. Both games are great though. They have a lot to.
True. Like I said, Imouth, she doesn't care what you do. But Devil's Advocate, Yishun Guang is the same thing, where she's like, doesn't care what the boss is doing, I'm just going to do what Yishun Guang wants to do.
Enjoy for someone who gets a kick out of action games. And I do feel like they have something to offer even compared to more traditional anime-style action games like, say, Kingdom Hearts. You may not get to experience the joys of learning to overcome an enemy-sided fight, but these games do have a skill ceiling that is rewarding to reach for, like...
I feel like you still do, because you're still fighting a boss. You're still going against his mechanics.
In any game. And on these games, that is all I have to say. As always, this video is the starting point of this.
Okay, so that's going to be the end. We shall, like... It was a good video. Got heated at times, but no, the main difference is just, we go back here. What's the difference between Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zero anyway? One's reactive, one's proactive. Okay, there's good points to both, there's bad points to both. There's Wuthering Waves does some things better, ZZ does some things worse. I just wish this wasn't... It feels weird comparing the two, because you can say, oh, they have a lot in common. And they do have a lot in common. But they are both fundamentally different games, in my opinion. So I feel like comparing the two is just... You're asking for that, the rabid sides of fandoms being like, did you just compare my favorite game to that sloppy game? What are you doing? So you just open yourself up for tribalism discussions, which hopefully isn't the case. I think it was a well-meaning video. I like the idea behind it. This has been a long reaction, so we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. But yeah, like, as a fan of both, I can see where you're coming from. I can see why this video was made. Honestly, just made for the love of the game, and I appreciate that. In fact, I still might make my versions, because I want to do like both games. I want to talk about both games. Hey, if you want to see that, please let me know, and I'll get to work on it. But yeah, good video, good video. Kind of enjoyed it, kind of. There's some things I don't agree with, which nobody's going to agree with everything. That's the key thing here. Nobody's going to agree with everything. It doesn't mean that the points and information presented weren't valid, for the most part. Okay. That said, I guess I'll catch you in the next one. Huge love to Jen. That was a video. That sounded really mean. I'm sorry. Yeah, take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And like always, stay refreshing. Catch you in the next one.